And we are live. So let's wait for everyone to join.
Gotcha.
Give it a few minutes. Let's see. People. Okay, we have a few people in here. So I guess we can start with our intro. So welcome to our Webinar Wednesday series at CyberData Pros. My name is Kylie and I'll be hosting this event today. I also have Chris Z here, who is a data privacy and security analyst here at CyberData Pros. Today he'll be discussing a step-by-step on how your business should start building a security program.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Kylie. I'm very excited to talk about this topic with everyone. So please don't hesitate. Say hello, ask questions, or answer the polls that we've set up too.
Great. So I'll be presenting a slide presentation that Z has put together. This is a very great slide. So let me pull this up.
Awesome.
And we can get started. Share PDF. Just a reminder, if anyone has any questions while he's going through this slide, don't hesitate to ask.
There we go.
So here we are. If you want to go ahead and start.
Awesome. Let's get started. So this is all about starting a security program for your business or organization. Okay. So name of this slide, building a comprehensive security program, a roadmap to success. Okay. This is just what I built and what we built as in CyberData Pros as a good roadmap to a good security program. So let me just go on to the next slide here. Okay. So introduction and what we'll be talking about today. And I'll just define these short guidelines here. They're all guidelines. So one, identify risks. Okay, we're gonna here today to define what a risk assessment is and why it is essential to your organization. And I'm also going to discuss what the different types of risks associated with your organization and what you should look out for. Okay, we're going to define goals. We are going to develop. We're going to develop security policies and procedures. We're going to look at what the importance is of aligning the security objectives with your business goals. Okay, and I'm going to give examples of potential security objectives. Okay, we're going to implement them. So you want to implement them in your business. We're going to discuss different security controls, including the technical and administrative controls. Okay, big one, monitor and assess. We always want to monitor and assess the effectiveness of the security program. And I'm going to highlight the importance of security audits, vulnerability assessments, and also penetration testing, which is a fun one. Big one here, engage stakeholders. And when I talk about stakeholders, we're talking about your organization, parts of your organization, whether that be HR, IT, your C-suite executives. All these stakeholders have to be involved in your security assessment. Okay. I love this one, and probably talk a little bit more about this one because I feel like it's very important, is provide training and awareness. Security training and awareness is huge in your organization and in your business. And I think every employee should go through training, security awareness training, phishing, all that stuff. We will talk about that today, but one of my favorite things to talk about. So that slide might get a little long. And then, of course, our last but not least, we're going to regularly update and adapt. So what I mean by that is every year or every quarter, best practice, we regularly update and adapt to new, cybersecurity attacks or updates on policies as well. So we were going to talk about that as well. Now, first thing, identify risks. Okay, risk assessment. It's a process. Okay, and we do this as well at our company. Identify potential hazards that could negatively impact the organization's ability to conduct business. Okay, all right. These hazards or risks could they vary. Okay, about financial uncertainty, legal liabilities, strategic management errors, accidents, or natural disasters. Now, what I mean by natural disasters is like if a tornado comes through or a hurricane and pretty much your servers were there and they just get destroyed, right? So we need to make sure that we have this process of how we are going to back up this data, right? So that's one of the risks associated with natural disasters, accidents. Someone deletes something, deletes a server, unplugs a server. We need something that will that's a policy that we can make sure that there's a backup of the server, right? A backup of your data. And then the financial uncertainty. Listen, ransomware hacks happen all the time. It's all over the place. I just heard today that there was a payout of $4.5 billion of a ransomware attack. We're talking about huge amounts of money, and we want to protect it for you. Okay, so risk assessments includes, hazards, like I said, with these hacking or natural disasters or phishing or there's legal liabilities with HIPAA laws, PII, PHI, which is personal information and personal health information if you're healthcare. So these are the two types I'm going to talk about: physical security risks and cybersecurity risks. I'll just do the next slide here. Okay. So let's go back here. So cybersecurity risks these risks could compromise the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's a big thing in cybersecurity, the CIA triad. Okay. And so your organization of the system's data. Okay. It could include malware attacks, hacking, data breaches, like I talked about. Like I think I heard a $4.5 billion breach attack, phishing. So that means like an email phishing or cell phone or anything like that that could help them get into the system and steal that data. We also talk about ransomware attacks. Like I said before, this is them taking your data and putting it up for ransom. Pretty much saying, hey, pay us this amount or we're not giving your data back. That's a huge thing. And then insider threats. We're talking about like your employees. Your employees are sometimes can be at risk. Could be an insider, as you will, do an inside job. So that's one of them. Physical security risks. So these refer to like potential threats, like I've talked about. Okay, like such as your buildings. If you're remote, maybe you're not going to look at this as a possible business assessment, saying, "Hey, we don't have a building, so why do we need to look at this?" You probably don't, but you want to make sure that in the cloud itself that you're protecting it as well. You're protecting that data. But if you don't have a building or equipment, maybe you say it's not applicable here, and you'll just move on through to the next thing. So this might not be for you for the physical security risk. if your business or organization is remote. But then I talked about natural disasters, right? The building has a hurricane, is there a hurricane destroys the building? There's got to be a backup data or where you can work remotely, or maybe have another building. Okay, so those are the physical security risks and cybersecurity risks. Okay, now big thing, we want to define goals. Okay, we want to set a clear, measurable security objective that align with the organization or your business with the overall business goal. Okay, we examples are custom consumer data or customer data. We want to make sure that's secure, but it's also available. Okay, we want to ensure regulatory compliance, unless you say you're a healthcare unit and you want HIPAA. Okay. HIPAA's a big one. PCI DSS, you're taking care of credit card information. We want to make sure that your business continuity. We want to during a cyber attack or disaster, we want to implement an instant response, so that way we have backups. That way we have a plan just in case something happens like a cyber attack. And we also want risk management. We want to identify, assess, and mitigate all these security risks. And when I say mitigate, that's where we're going here. You want a tough but also available data, right? So you want your customers, or say if you're in the healthcare, you want people to get that data. Say that customer wants their healthcare file. We want to make sure it's available for them, but we also don't want to make it available to anybody else. So we have to. There's that like checks and balances. And what I mean mitigate is you're never going to just get rid of cyber attacks. Not going to happen. But we are going to mitigate the security risks to help out. And especially with natural disasters. Natural disasters is a big one. Hurricane could come through, tornado, tsunami even. It happens. And we got to make sure there's a plan in place for making sure our data is great and we can still run as a business. Also, we also want user access control. And I talked about this a little bit. So we want to ensure the users, employees, contracts have the access to the data, but that's their role. So that's when I mean user access, they only have access to a certain amount of things. We don't want to give everybody admin access and have pretty much lay of the land. Pretty much, we want to make sure that only users have the access to these programs, or to the data they're supposed to have. And a big thing, security awareness, huge. I think this is a huge part of cybersecurity, is to train your employees. Train your employees. It's a big one, because if you don't train your employees, something could happen of we call it shoulder surfing, of someone's password is written down on a notepad, and someone shoulder surfs and gets their password. It's simple as that. So if we teach these objectives, or certain ways of mitigating security threats like shoulder surfing, or not writing stuff down on a notepad, and make sure they put their password somewhere else, that stuff that we use like LastPassword or 1Password, that way be little to cyber threats or cyber crime. All right, so we're on to develop security policies and procedures. Now, when we talk about this, security policies, so there are a set of rules, right? The rules, guidelines formulated by your business that pretty much sets the protection of your assets, of your data, of your employees, of your equipment. All this stuff needs to be developed, communicated, enforced, and then we have to review and update. So when I talk about developing, we create the policies tailored to your organization, whether it be in healthcare or um, digital advertising or anything like that. We're going to identify the risks, what legal requirements. Say we're holding PHI, we're in the healthcare. We want to make sure that the PHI only goes to a certain amount of people. But it pretty much we want the industry best practices, and that's by researching what the best practices are for your business for securing that data. Um, we also want to inform the employees. That's when we get to the communication, right? So then we develop the policies, then we communicate with everybody. That's IT, the C-suite levels, HR, everybody in your organization. Hey, once we develop these policies, we have to communicate them across the whole organization. Uh, so, like I said, formal training. Training is a big one. Training is a huge one. Regular updates, making sure you're sending these out to all your employees. Okay, and it not only just sending them. Say your one employee just started. He wanted to look at one policy, maybe incident response, or he's in IT, so he wants to look at incident response. They have to be easy to access for your employees because you want them to review them. You want them to see them. Okay. Enforcement. I mean, enforcement pretty speaks for themselves. You enforce the policy that you wrote. Um, you adhere to it. You monitor compliance with the policies. Okay, so you monitor compliance with all your employees. Hey, this is the policy. We are enforcing it, whether it be an incident response, business continuity plan, which we will talk about later in the next slide. We want to make sure we enforce these. And then the big one, review and update. We've said this in this office a lot, but with review and update, because technology is ever evolving. Okay, so new tech always comes out. New, like AI is a huge one. Some of our clients want reviewing of AI and putting new policies in for AI and how to use it. So we want to review and update these policies every year. And maybe every quarter for some of the policies. But best practices every year. Okay, next slide. All right. So continued, right? We developed the security policy and procedures. We enforced it. We reviewed and update. And now these are the key areas I would like to talk about and should cover in your business. Okay. So we got the access control policy. Access control policy pretty much defines where your data goes, who's seeing that data, and that's based on roles. So like IT is going to only have certain amounts of data. HR is only going to have certain amounts of data, like employee information, things like that. IT is going to have network kinds of data, and that thing. And like I said, it's based on the roles and responsibilities, of course. Then we go to data and protection and privacy policy. So we outline how the personal and sensitive data within your organization should be handled and protected, ensuring the regulatory compliance. Say you're a healthcare organization and you have a lot of personal health information. You want to protect that data, and regulatory compliance is HIPAA. You want to make sure it's HIPAA compliance. If it's not HIPAA compliant, you could have a lot of fines and legal troubles there. So we want to make sure we protect our sensitive data. Okay, and we make sure that our privacy policy is saying we're not selling any third party, sending your data to any third parties. Network security policy. Um, this is going to define how the network works. Whether you're using like an AWS cloud or Azure, or you have a server right in your office, we this policy defines how the network works. Whether you have a firewall and you have some load balancers or a program, we want to see how that works. You have your incident response policy. The policy, this policy is steps to be taken, and we talked about this a couple slides ago. If there's a security event, if there's a security breach or anything, we have a policy in line to help us out of the security, the threat. We want to make sure that's all set. Physical security policy. Now, like I said before in a couple slides before, a couple of your organization, your business might not have a building. So you might not need a physical security policy. This might be like, I don't need this. Well, if you don't need it, that's fine. If you work remote, that's fine. But if you do have a bit like an organization that has a building or a couple buildings, you want a physical security policy, like how you check in people, guest logs, how you know who's coming in and out, how you protect your data in the server room, how you lock the doors. Is it double locked? Do you have a retinal scanner or a thumbprint, or a finger scanner? You want to make sure you have all these in place if you have a building. And then your user behavior policy. This is an acceptable use policy. What you can and cannot do to the data. And this is for your employees to say, well, I can't send PHI or your personal health information over email to someone. That's not very safe. And then you got the disaster recovery, and that we talked about this in previous slides. That's also talking about like a big sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second, but this policy outlines the organization will recover from that disaster. So if a hurricane happens or a tornado or even a cyber threat, we are making sure after that disaster happens, how we are recovering from that disaster, whether it be, we have another building that has backup data, or a server that's, in AWS that has something backed up that they can bring over, that we can bring over and make sure that we're still up and running the next day, or even, 24 hours. I mean, you have to make sure your organization goes through those steps to make sure, like, well, I don't think we can do it in 24 hours, but maybe we can do it in 48 hours, recovering the data. So you might be out a couple days, but at least you didn't lose all the data. Okay, you want to make sure you have backups, and that's going to be in your disaster recovery and your business continuity plan. And the big one, of course, security awareness and training policy, right? The big one, I love it. It's pretty much the policy that would stipulate your requirements for ongoing training every year for your employees. And I mean all your employees. We want to make sure they know what they're doing when they're sending information, or whether they're looking at certain amounts of data, and making sure like it's not an open screen. They're locking their screens when they leave their desk. Things like of that nature can help out a lot with a business. I mean, I've talked to some businesses around the area and say, hey, what's cybersecurity? And a lot of them don't know what it is. They don't know how to go about it. They think it's just like password protection, or some people say, oh, it's just protecting your data. But like, how do they protect the data? And that's what we want to teach our employees. How do we protect it? How can you protect it? Because that's where it all comes from. It's not always the hacker. It's always maybe the person that is sitting right next to you that sends it through an email, personal information that shouldn't have gone out there, maybe a password or an admin password. It can happen, and it has happened. I've seen it happen. Not with this job, but another job. Okay, so we're going to talk about two types of controls here. We're going to implement security controls. We're going to talk about two: technical controls and administrative controls. Now I'm gonna define this as the first is technical controls, and it's the hardware and software, the mechanisms that protect the systems and data. So that would be your firewalls or your IDS or IPS, your antivirus. Everybody knows about antivirus nowadays. How you encrypt data, your access control systems. Your access control systems would, if people don't know, they restrict access to networks and data based on user roles and permissions. So like we talked about, only a certain amount of people or certain people are going to have the access to certain amounts of data or your network. So, and then also you want great security configurations. This involves setting up networks, your firewall, and it minimizes the vulnerabilities of people getting in. Okay. Now, administrative controls. Now, this is gonna, they're the policies and procedures, strategies developed and implemented by your business to manage a human element of the security. Okay. So some is the security policies and procedures, like we talked about just a couple slides ago. What, like your access control policies, your incident policy, your business continuity policy. Got stuck on that one for a little bit. So these documents are going to be data classification, access control, incident response, everything I talked about in the previous slides. Big one, again, security awareness training, your incident response planning, regular audits and assessments. So your pen testing, your internal audits. It doesn't have to be like a lot of people talk about ISO certification. It could just be internal of what we need to make sure we mitigate these cybersecurity threats. And then your vendor management is a good one. We didn't talk about this, so I'll explain a little bit. So this is managing with vendors that other companies that you work with, you make sure that they're also secure as well. And you send them a vendor security questionnaire to make sure they're secure. Because if they're not secure and they're holding your data as well or getting into your data, they can an attack can happen through that business to your business. So we want to make sure the security questionnaire that we give our vendor has the right answers before we just start giving them information or our data. So that's what that means. So the next slide is we want to monitor and assess. Okay. So when I mean a monitor, we want to assess the effectiveness of the policies and the technical controls of the security program. Okay. We want to always assess and see if we can just, sometimes we're going to have to tweak here and there to make sure, you know, some things are protected, or maybe the customer can't receive their file because, you know, we shut them out with a firewall rule. We don't want that. We want to make sure that it's also available to customers if you're running like a hospital or some kind of PHI level information. We want to make sure that you get the information, but also protect it from everybody else. So we want to make sure we have a robust security posture, but we also want to make sure it's available to certain people, okay, to your customers, consumers, and clients. So that's something you have to talk about with your organization. Regular auditing, huge. Want to make sure that we conduct security evidence and gather security evidence for all security controls, administrative and technical. Vulnerability assessments. Want to make sure all the computers that you're using are up to date. That's one of the things. Also, your network's up to date and your encryption's up to date. You're using the new encryption software. You're using, if you're using Macs, make sure the iOS is always up to date. A lot of the vulnerability assessments that we do show that they're out of date. A lot of people don't like to shut down their computer, and it's not funny, but at the same time, I used to be that guy that didn't never shut off his computer either. But it's good to update your computer. So if you're at home right now, please update your computer. Because they do have security patches for whether you're using Windows or your Mac iOS. Big thing every year, you should do a penetration test. This is pretty much we play hackers. We see if we can get into your security network. Okay, we want to make sure we can get in all the way to admin privileges. Well, of course, we don't want to see that, but we're going to try our best to do so. So you want to make sure that you have a penetration testing every year, because this is better than a hacker actually going in and stealing your data. We're not going to steal your data. We're just going to make sure that you're security sound, as you will. So we also want to review and analyze incident reports. If you had an incident report, this is like a lesson learned. If you had an incident report, what can we review the incident report, and how can we learn from this? How can we do something better to make sure it's either say we are out for 24 or 48 hours because of a data breach. How can we make it better? We want to do a risk assessment, and we want to make sure that certain risks are mitigated. Let's go on to the next slide here. The big thing, engage stakeholders, and I talked about in the beginning. We want to engage everybody in the organization about these private policies or incident response. Pretty much all your security policies need to be out with your executive leadership, your IT teams, your human resources is a big one, legal team. If you have a legal team, some people don't, or some people have it internally, and your end users and employees, and that's a big one. Your end users and employees, because they're a bulk of your business, right? Your C-suites are at like 2 or 3, but your end users could be in the hundreds, and you want to make sure that you engage them as well to make sure that they're abiding by these policies, and also making sure that they have the right knowledge of sending data, looking at data, putting it on a USB. We want to make sure that they're involved in these policies and making of these policies as well. Big one. I love this one, and I'll try not to talk your ear off about security awareness, but I love it because I feel like employees nowadays don't get it unless you bring someone in that does the security training. And I feel like companies out there should always involve their employees in this security training. So so you want the security knowledge, you want a training every year at least, and your onboarding, of course. Always get the training of the latest threats, security best practices, organization security policies and procedures, just like it says right here, this empowers them to make better decisions in their daily work. Okay. If you train the employees, they're going to know, well, I shouldn't send this. It's too much. There's PHI, there's personal information here. And they'll just send it through an email if they're not trained. Phishing attacks, making sure that they know what a phishing attack looks like. Actually doing phishing campaigns in your training will help them a long way. Everybody uses email now, and that they know that hackers know that, and they want to make sure. We want to make sure that we're training them through like either a phishing campaign or a training that what to look out for in certain emails that could be just pretty much not your organization, or Google change of password. We want to make sure that they look out for certain cues. Regulatory compliance. All right. So what I'm talking about is if you're signing up for ISO compliance or HIPAA compliance or SOC compliance, this has to be done. It has to be, security training has to be done every year. It's a great practice. And even if you don't have a compliance, I really think it's a great practice to do it every year. Um, Again, teaching your employees good security measures is always the best response, right? And look, instant response training helps employees understand their role in the event if a security incident happens. If they know that uh, they did someone did a phishing, clicked on a phishing link, they're going to know what to do. IT is going to know what to do and what steps to take to reduce and isolate that incident so nothing else gets out, so they don't get into their network. So examples of topics to be covered in this security awareness: password management. Best practices for our time is, I think, one uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters. You can make it as 12 long, 14, I think is best practice right now. So whatever that best practice is, implement it, right? We're going to implement it in with all your employees. What I talked about, email and phishing awareness, safe internet browsing. We want to make sure we go to safe sites, not unsecure sites, not iffy sites. We don't want to do that on work computers anyways. So don't. We also want to do some social engineering awareness, different types of would be like tailgating. One thing is about tailgating is if you have a physical security building, right? Say I beeped in for me to go in. I have a tag or a thumbprint or a retinal scan. Don't have people tailgate you in. That's not good. But sometimes we need to train about that, right? Because we don't know that the guy behind us is going behind us. Sometimes we're oblivious to it. But if we train it, maybe we'll bring some knowledge to that person to look behind them once in a while and say, hey, what are you doing here? So that's part of the social engineering, physical security, as we talked about. We want to make sure we're protecting physical assets like laptops, mobile devices, access cards. I mean, my last job, I had an access card, and I can't believe I tell some people this, but there's a lot of people that lost their security card to get into the building, or and people have gotten in from the last job to scan in, and they're not an employee there. That's very risky, and it's very dangerous for anything. We're also your data protection and privacy and security policies and procedures. Okay, we're almost at the end. I hope everybody enjoyed it, but we're almost at the end. Regularly update and adapt. Okay. I mean, this is a big thing because if you just keep your regular policies and don't update them at least every year, you're going to be behind the tracks, and vulnerabilities are going to show, either in your network or your physical security. Like I said, technology ever evolving. Things are moving quick with tech these days, and new new tech is coming out, especially with like AI. So we want to make sure with emerging threats, um, uh, sometimes with new forms of malware, phishing tactics, hacking techniques. Um, your security report must stay informed about these emerging threats. Okay, technological advancements. Excuse me, a little tongue twister there. As your organization embraces new technologies, you have to update the security program as your tech updates, whether that be cloud environments or unique challenges with a lot of people are doing remote work now. Now, if you go from a building to remote work, you have to make a policy about that. Um, re- Regular changes. Okay, so sometimes you're looking at laws and regulations, especially if you're looking at HIPAA compliance or credit card compliance. Laws and regulations change all the time, and we want to adapt. We want to adapt to those changes. A lesson learned, and we talked about this a previous slide. It's crucial to, if you have an incident, you have a lessons learned, right? You want to always do better, always uh, come above and to come up over the top and adapt. So what I mean by that is having have like if you have an incident, to learn from it and make it better. So if you have like a cyber attack and with a phishing email, okay, someone clicks a link, we want to make sure, did we isolate it right, and what could we do better to isolate it maybe quicker, or maybe do a little bit more security training. um, Even if that person did security training in the beginning and still kicked a phishing link, maybe you say, okay, we're going to do another security training with a certain amount of people, or the whole employees again, because we got to make sure that the lessons are that this doesn't happen again, pretty much. That's what the lessons learned. And industry best practices. So what I mean by that, like cybersecurity advancing rapidly. With new best practice standards, we just need to develop and stay informed of what best practices of security program and cutting edge. And that's what we do. We make sure that we look at your updates and review your policies to make sure that you're up to date, and you're using industry best practices in cybersecurity. Conclusion. We're here, guys. We are here. So the conclusion, what did we learn today? Identify risks. We conduct a thorough risk assessment. We understand potential threats. Define goals. What goals do we need in your organization? Develop security policies. Create a set of security policies for your organization, for your standards and expectations of your C-suites, your IT, and the rest of your employees. Develop these security policies, right? Or sorry, we already talked about that. Implement security policy, security controls, which both are administrative and technical, right? We want to monitor and assess, regularly evaluate the effectiveness of your security policies, doing security audits, vulnerability assessments, and pen testing or penetration testing. We want to engage the stakeholders, your IT, C-suite, your HR, your marketing, all those have to be engaged into in which we go next to. You provide training and awareness, which is I love. We got to implement on a year basis regular and targeted training sessions, and we have to update these trainings every year because, again, like I said, I could say it over and over and over and over again. With tech is always ever evolving, and making sure that with new tech coming out, you provide training for that tech, and make sure that these employees are well aware of it. But just remember, building a robust security program is not a one-time task. It's not like one and done. It's ever evolving. You're always going to have to review and update. I mean, we're talking about you're not just set in a year. You just don't write the policy and say, hey, I'm done. We're done. I don't have to do it anymore. No, that's not how we do things. We have to make sure that we always make sure that we mitigate threats in your policies and in your technical controls, whether in your physical security, whether it may be. We always have to review and update. I mean, this is an ongoing issue, right? So we got to make sure we mitigate these threats by doing updating policies and reviewing policies. We also have to make sure to provide training and awareness. But again, hope you enjoyed this webinar. Building into the security program. I hope today you learned something from this awesome slideshow. And I encourage you to dive deeper. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me. So I'll send it back to you, Kylie.
Great. That was a great presentation, Z. Very good job. We can move on to the Q&A now. So let me X this out. We can move on to the Q&A. Does anybody have any questions that Z didn't cover? I'm sure he covered them all, but just in case, give it like a minute or two. Well, it seems like you covered everything. So
I guess so.
that's totally fine.
I hope everybody learned
Well,
something
everyone,
today.
yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This is a wrap for our Webinar Wednesday series. Please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn for the latest updates on our next one. And also a reminder, as always, this webinar will be live on our YouTube by the end of the week, so be on the lookout for that. You can also visit our website at cyberdatapros.com for more information. So we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next webinar.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
All right, bye.